My name is María del Carmen Vásquez, and I'm 72 years old. Today, I want to tell you the most painful story of my entire life, something I never thought could happen to me. If you're a mother who has given everything for her children, if you've sacrificed your youth, your dreams, your health for them, please stay with me, because what I'm about to share will touch your heart deeply. It was a Tuesday morning in March when my own daughter pushed me down the basement stairs, and I heard that padlock click shut from the outside. In that moment, sitting on that cold, damp concrete floor, I understood that everything I believed about motherhood, about family, about the love I thought I had cultivated, it was all a lie. I spent my entire life believing I had raised my children well. I worked from dawn selling empanadas on the street corners of Guadalajara to pay for their education after my husband died. Elena, my middle child, was my pride and joy. She was intelligent, beautiful, the first in our family to graduate from university. I sold my wedding ring to pay for her books. I went hungry so she could eat. But there I was, trapped like an animal in my own daughter's basement, and all I could think was, Dios mío, how did I get here? You know, as mothers, we always make excuses for our children's behavior. When Elena started treating me coldly after she married that wealthy man, Ricardo, I told myself it was just the adjustment of married life. When she stopped visiting me in my little house, I convinced myself she was just busy with her new social circle. When she began speaking to me with that tone of voice, you know the one I'm talking about, like I was bothering her just by existing, I thought it was temporary. The signs were all there, dear friends. But we mothers, we see what we want to see, don't we? We hold on to hope even when our children break our hearts piece by piece. That Tuesday morning, after 2 days of being locked in that basement, something inside me died, but something else was born. As I sat there in the darkness, with rats running over my feet and the smell of dampness filling my lungs, I heard my grandmother's voice in my memory. Mija, when everything seems lost, that's when God is closest to you. My abuela used to say that during the revolution, when she lost everything, she would tell me stories while making tortillas by hand, her fingers working the masa while she spoke of surviving impossible times. The strongest women, she would say, are forged in the fire of betrayal and abandonment. I never understood what she meant until that moment in the basement. Elena had told the neighbors I had gone to visit relatives in Michoacán. She had my escape planned so perfectly. But what she didn't count on was that her mother, this old woman she thought was weak and helpless, still had fight left in her. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching, learning, preparing, because while she thought I was just a burden to be disposed of, I was discovering documents, overhearing phone calls, understanding the full scope of what my own flesh and blood was planning to do to me. This is a safe space where you can share your pain without judgment. If my story touches your heart, please give it a like. Subscribe, because here you'll find understanding, and comment with your own experiences. I read every message, and I know you're not alone in this struggle. The darkness of that basement taught me something Elena never expected me to learn. That forgiveness doesn't mean being foolish, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching someone the consequences of their actions. What I did after I escaped that basement, that lesson she will carry with her for the rest of her life. Maybe you're wondering how a mother ends up living something like this. Let me tell you who I was, who I really was, before that basement changed everything. I was 35 years old when my husband Jose died in a construction accident in Bogota. One moment he was kissing me goodbye at dawn, promising to bring home money for Elena's school supplies, and by evening his foreman was at my door with his hard hat in his hands and tears in his eyes. I had 3 children. Carlos was only 8, Miguel was 6, and Elena, my Elena, was 10 years old and already showing signs of being special. She was the smartest child in her class, always asking questions, always dreaming big. While other little girls played with dolls, she would sit with my accounting books, pretending to be a businesswoman. After Jose died, I had 2 choices: fall apart or become stronger than I ever imagined possible. I chose to become a warrior. Every morning at 4 a.m. while my children slept, I would wake up to prepare empanadas for the construction workers who gathered at the bus stops. My hands would be covered in masa, my back aching from hunching over that small stove, but I sang softly, the same lullabies my mother sang to me. Those songs kept me sane during the darkest hours. Do you know what it's like to count every peso? To choose between buying milk for your children or medicine for yourself? I would eat the empanadas that didn't sell, the broken ones, the burned ones, so my children could have fresh bread and proper meals. Elena was always different from her brothers. While Carlos and Miguel were content playing football in the street with a ball made of rags, Elena had bigger dreams. She would watch the telenovelas and point to the elegant women. Mama, someday I'm going to live in a house like that, with a garden and a maid. I didn't see anything wrong with her ambition then. I was proud of it. I thought her dreams would lift our entire family out of poverty. When Elena turned 15, she had her quinceañera, not the grand celebration other girls had, but I saved every peso for months to buy her a beautiful pink dress. I remember her spinning in front of our cracked mirror, looking like a princess. Gracias, Mama, she whispered and kissed my cheek. Someday I'll give you everything you deserve. Those words kept me going through 5 more years of selling empanadas at dawn. When Elena graduated high school with the highest grades in her class, the principal called me aside. Señora Vásquez, your daughter has the potential to go to university, but we had no money. The tuition was more than I made in 6 months. That night, I looked at my wedding ring, the only thing of value Jose had left me. It was a simple gold band, but it represented 20 years of love, of building a life together. Elena found me crying at the kitchen table. Mama, what's wrong? I took her hands in mine and slipped that ring into her palm. This is for your future, mija. This is so you can become the woman you're meant to be. She cried with me that night. She promised she would never forget my sacrifice. She swore she would take care of me when I got old, that she would give me the comfortable life I had never had. I believed every word. Elena thrived at university. She studied business administration and graduated cum laude. I was there at her graduation, wearing my only good dress, the same black dress I wore to Jose's funeral, but I was so proud. My daughter, the first university graduate in our family. But something began to change after graduation. When Elena got her first job at a prestigious company, she started speaking differently. She would correct my grammar, suggest I improve my appearance when she brought colleagues home. Little comments that felt like tiny cuts. Mama, maybe don't mention that you sell food on the street. Then she met Ricardo. Ricardo came from one of those families with old money, the kind that traced their lineage back to Spanish colonizers. He drove expensive cars and wore suits that cost more than I made in a year. When Elena brought him home for the first time, I saw how she looked at our small house with embarrassment. This is cozy, Ricardo said, but his eyes were cold, judgmental. After they started dating seriously, Elena's visits became less frequent. Phone calls became shorter, and when she did come, she seemed like she was performing the role of dutiful daughter rather than actually being one. The day she announced her engagement, she also announced they would be moving to Guadalajara for Ricardo's business. It's a great opportunity for us, Mama. You understand, don't you? What I understood was that my daughter was disappearing, replaced by someone who looked like her, but whose heart had grown cold. But I told myself it was just the natural progression of life. Children grow up, they move away, they build their own families. I convinced myself that the Elena who kissed my cheek and promised to take care of me was still there, just buried under the pressure of her new life. How wrong I was. When Elena called me that September afternoon and proposed that I sell my little house and move in with her, I thought God had finally answered my prayers. Mama, she said, her voice sweet like honey, Ricardo and I have been talking. We have this big house, and you're getting older. Wouldn't it be better if you came to live with us, so you can be properly cared for? I was sitting in my small living room, the same room where I had raised my 3 children, where Jose and I had shared our dreams where I had cried and prayed and survived. The walls were cracked, the furniture was old, but it was mine. It was the only thing I truly owned in this world. But Elena's words painted such a beautiful picture. Imagine, Mama, no more worrying about paying rent, no more being alone. We have a garden where you can grow your herbs, a big kitchen where you can cook for the family, and I'll finally be able to take care of you the way you took care of me. My heart melted. This was my Elena talking, the daughter I remembered, the one who had promised to give me everything I deserved. Are you sure, Mija? I don't want to be a burden. A burden. She laughed, and it sounded genuine. Mama, you could never be a burden. You're my mother. It's time I returned all the love you gave me. I cried that night, tears of joy. Finally, in my old age, I would have the family closeness I had always dreamed of. I would be able to help with grandchildren when they came, share my wisdom, be part of something bigger than my solitary existence. The process of selling my house happened faster than I expected. Elena sent a real estate agent, a friend of Ricardo's family, who assured me I was getting a fair price. Señora Vásquez, this is a very good offer for a house in this neighborhood, he said, and I trusted him because he was Elena's friend. I should have asked more questions. I should have gotten a second opinion. But when your child is offering you a new life, you don't think about the details. You think about love, about family, about finally belonging somewhere again. The day I moved to Guadalajara, Elena and Ricardo picked me up in their luxury car. As we drove through their neighborhood, houses like palaces, gardens like parks, I felt so grateful. My daughter had achieved everything she dreamed of, and now she was sharing it with me. Their house was magnificent. 3 stories, marble floors, a chandelier in the entrance that cost more than I had made in 10 years. Elena showed me to my room, a small space near the kitchen, simply furnished but clean. I thought you'd be comfortable here, Mama. You're close to everything you need. The first week was like a honeymoon. Elena would ask about my day, we would eat dinner together, and she seemed genuinely interested in my stories about the old days. I helped in the kitchen, tended to her small herb garden, and felt useful again. But then the little comments started. Mama, maybe you shouldn't tell that story about selling empanadas when Ricardo's friends come over. They might not understand our background. Could you be quieter in the mornings? Ricardo has important calls and he needs silence. I think it would be better if you ate in the kitchen when we have guests. The dining room conversation might be too sophisticated for you to follow. Each comment was delivered with a smile, wrapped in concern for my comfort or well-being. But they cut deeper than any insult, because they came from my own daughter. I began to understand that I wasn't a beloved mother welcomed into her daughter's home. I was a charity case being managed and controlled. The truth revealed itself completely when I overheard Elena on the phone with someone. I still don't know who. Yes, she sold the house just like we planned. The money's already transferred. No, she doesn't suspect anything. Look, it's only temporary. There's a very nice assisted living facility about an hour from here. Clean, professional staff. And she'll be with people her own age. What? No, of course I'm not heartless. But she's becoming a burden. And Ricardo's patience is wearing thin. I stood frozen outside her office door, my heart breaking into pieces. The house sale money, my life savings, my security, it was already gone. And I was just a problem to be solved, an embarrassment to be hidden away. That night at dinner, Elena smiled at me across the table. How are you adjusting, Mama? Are you happy here? I looked into her eyes, José's eyes, the eyes I had gazed into when she was a baby, when she was sick, when she graduated, and I saw a stranger. I'm fine, mija, I whispered, because what else could I say? Where else could I go? But inside I was planning. I started paying attention to her phone calls, watching her movements, understanding the life she had built with my sacrifice as the foundation. I had raised a daughter who saw her own mother as disposable. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The answer came sooner than I expected, on that terrible Tuesday morning when Elena's mask finally fell completely away. That damp, dark basement became my tomb for 2 eternal days. Let me tell you exactly what happened, because I want you to understand the depths of cruelty that one human being can inflict on another, especially when that person is supposed to love you unconditionally. It was 7:30 in the morning on that Tuesday. I had woken up early, as always, and was quietly making coffee in the kitchen when Elena stormed in. Her face was twisted with a rage I had never seen before. "I heard you on the phone last night," she hissed. "Calling Carlos, telling him about the assisted living facility. How dare you interfere with my plans?" I had indeed called my youngest son Carlos, who lives here in Guadalajara with his family. I was desperate, confused, needing someone to help me understand what was happening to my life. "Elena, mija, I just needed to talk to someone. I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening." "What's happening?" she said, grabbing my arm so tightly it left bruises. "Is that you're an ungrateful old woman who can't accept that I'm trying to help you." She dragged me toward the basement door. I couldn't believe what was happening. This was my daughter, the child I had carried in my womb, nursed at my breast, protected from every harm. "Elena, please. What are you doing? Let's talk about this." "No more talking, Mama. You need to learn to be grateful. You need to understand your place in this house." She pushed me down those concrete steps. I fell hard, my hip hitting the edge of a step, pain shooting through my entire body. When I tried to climb back up, she was already closing the door. The sound of that padlock clicking shut. It's a sound that still haunts my dreams. "Elena!" I screamed, pounding on the door. "Elena, please. This is insane. Let me out." "You'll stay there until you learn some respect." Her voice came through the door, cold and final. "And if you make too much noise, you'll stay there longer." Then I heard her footsteps walking away, and I was alone in complete darkness. The basement was a nightmare. The concrete floor was always damp, and within hours, that dampness had seeped through my clothes to my bones. There was no light switch I could reach, no window, nothing but suffocating blackness. The smell was awful. Mold, dampness, and something else I didn't want to identify. I could hear things moving in the corners, small scratching sounds that made my skin crawl. Rats, definitely rats. By the second hour, I needed to use the bathroom desperately. I called for Elena until my voice was hoarse, but there was no response. The humiliation of having to relieve myself in that corner like an animal. It was designed to break my spirit, to make me feel subhuman. The hunger came in waves. My stomach would cramp painfully, reminding me that Elena had calculated this torture perfectly. She knew I was diabetic. She knew I needed to eat regularly to manage my condition. But there was nothing, not even water. But the thirst was worse than the hunger. My mouth became so dry I could barely swallow. I found myself licking the damp walls, desperate for any moisture. Can you imagine? A mother who had given everything for her child, reduced to licking walls like an animal. During those endless hours, I heard Elena moving around upstairs, living her normal life. I could hear her talking on the phone, laughing even. And I realized she had done this before in her mind. She had planned exactly how to break me. On the first day, around noon, I heard the doorbell ring. Then voices. Elena talking to our neighbor, Señora Garcia. "Oh, Maria? She went to visit her sister in Michoacán," Elena said, her voice cheerful and normal. "Yes, it was very sudden. You know how family emergencies are. She'll be gone for a few weeks." Señora Garcia had brought over some tamales she had made, wondering why she hadn't seen me in the garden that morning. She was worried about me, this kind woman who barely knew me, while my own daughter had locked me away like a rabid dog. The second night was the worst. The cold had settled into my bones. My hip was swollen and painful from the fall, and I began to feel dizzy from not eating. I was scared I might pass out and never wake up. But it was during that darkest moment that I heard my grandmother's voice again, as clearly as if she were sitting beside me in that basement. "Mija, the darkest hour is just before dawn. Don't let them break your spirit. You are stronger than you know. Mi abuela had survived the Cristero War, had hidden priests in her basement while soldiers searched house to house. She knew what it meant to endure, to survive when survival seemed impossible. I started talking to her in that darkness, telling her about Elena, about how I had failed as a mother. But her voice in my memory was firm. You didn't fail, mija. You gave love. What she chose to do with that love is her responsibility, not yours. By the morning of the second day, something had changed in me. Yes, I was weak, hungry, and scared, but I was also angry. Not the destructive anger that consumes you, but the righteous anger that gives you strength. I began to explore every inch of that basement with my hands, looking for a way out. And that's when I found it. A small window near the ceiling, covered with old boards. The wood was rotted from years of dampness. As I worked to loosen those boards with my bare hands, I made myself a promise. When I got out of there, Elena would learn that her mother was not the helpless old woman she thought she could dispose of. She was about to discover who María del Carmen Vásquez really was. In that complete darkness, I remembered my grandmother's words. Mija, when everything is lost, that's when God is closest to you. My abuela Elena, yes, I had named my daughter after her, used to tell me stories while we made tortillas together in her small kitchen in Bogotá. She would work the masa with her weathered hands, hands that had survived the revolution, poverty, and the loss of 3 children, while she shared the wisdom that only comes from enduring the unendurable. During the Cristeros War, she would say, when they were hunting down the priests and burning the churches, I hid Father Miguel in my cellar for 3 months. Every day I thought they would find us. Every day I prepared to die. But in that darkness, Mika, I learned something important. God doesn't abandon us in our suffering. He transforms us through it. As I sat on that cold concrete floor, my body weak from hunger and my spirit broken from betrayal, I finally understood what she meant. I began to pray, not the formal prayers I recited in church, but the desperate conversations you have with God when everything else has failed. Señor, I whispered into the darkness, I don't understand why this is happening to me. I tried to be a good mother. I sacrificed everything for my children. Where did I go wrong? And in that silence, I began to hear not just my grandmother's voice, but my own inner voice, the voice of the woman I had been before I became defined only by my role as mother and wife. I remembered the young Maria, who had dreams of becoming a teacher before she married Jose. I remembered the woman who had survived widowhood and built a business from nothing, who had raised 3 children alone and never once asked for charity. When had I started believing that I was just a burden to be managed? During those long hours, I forced myself to examine every moment of Elena's childhood, every decision I had made in raising her. Had I spoiled her? Had I taught her that love meant always giving in, always sacrificing, never expecting anything in return? I thought about the day she graduated from university, how proud I was standing in that auditorium in my one good dress. But I also remembered how she had introduced me to her classmates. This is my mother. She works very hard to support our family. Not, this is the woman who sacrificed everything so I could be here. Not, this is the strongest person I know. Even then, she was already distancing herself from who I really was. But as I prayed and reflected in that basement, I realized something that changed everything. I had confused enabling with loving. I had taught Elena that my needs, my dignity, my very existence were less important than her comfort and success. Forgive me, Señor, I whispered, for not teaching her the value of respect. Forgive me for not showing her that love requires mutual honor. It was during the second night, when the cold was so intense I could barely feel my fingers, that I experienced what I can only call a miracle. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet kind that changes everything inside you. I was reciting the rosary from memory when suddenly I felt warmth spreading through my chest. It wasn't physical warmth, my body was still freezing, but something deeper, a certainty that I was not alone, that I had never been alone, and that this suffering had a purpose I couldn't yet see. My grandmother's voice came back to me again. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, mija. Sometimes God allows us to be broken so we can be rebuilt even stronger. That's when I began to plan my escape, not from desperation, but from a place of calm determination. I explored every inch of that basement systematically, my hands becoming my eyes. When I found that rotted window frame, I didn't see it as just a possible exit. I saw it as God providing exactly what I needed when I needed it. But more importantly, I began to plan what would happen after I escaped. This wasn't just about getting out of the basement. This was about teaching Elena a lesson she would never forget, not out of revenge, but out of love, the kind of tough love I should have shown her years ago. As I worked to loosen those wooden boards, splinters cutting into my hands, I thought about justice versus vengeance. Vengeance would be calling the police immediately, having Elena arrested, destroying her life as she had tried to destroy mine. But justice would be showing her the consequences of her actions in a way that might actually save her soul. I thought about Jesus, how he cleansed the temple, not in anger but in righteous determination to restore what was holy. Sometimes love requires us to be strong, to refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when that behavior comes from someone we love more than our own life. Help me, Señor, I prayed as I felt the first board coming loose, to act with wisdom, not hatred. Help me to save my daughter's soul, even if she has tried to destroy my body. The morning light that finally filtered through that small window wasn't just illuminating my path to freedom. It was illuminating my path to becoming the woman I was always meant to be. A woman who understood that true love sometimes requires us to allow others to face the consequences of their choices, even when those others are our own children. Elena was about to learn that the mother she thought she had broken had actually been transformed into someone far stronger than she ever imagined. On the second day, I heard Elena's footsteps walking away and the sound of her car starting. It was now or never. The window I had discovered was small, barely large enough for a child, but desperation and divine intervention can make the impossible happen. I had spent hours loosening those rotted boards with my bare hands, my fingernails broken and bleeding, splinters embedded in my palms. When I finally pushed that last board aside and saw daylight, I wept, not just from relief, but from gratitude to God for not abandoning me in my darkest hour. Getting through that window was the hardest thing I had ever done physically. I'm 72 years old, and my body had been weakened by 2 days without food or water. But fear gives you strength you didn't know you had. The fear of dying in that basement, forgotten and alone, pushed me through that narrow opening. I fell into Elena's garden, her perfect, manicured garden that she was so proud of, and lay there for several minutes, just breathing fresh air and feeling sunlight on my face. The roses she had planted were in full bloom, and their fragrance was like heaven after the stench of that basement. But I couldn't stay there. Elena could return at any moment, and I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I decided my next move. I entered the house through the back door, the same door I had used every morning to tend her herbs, when I still believed I was a welcome guest rather than a prisoner. Everything looked normal, elegant, perfectly arranged, as if nothing terrible had happened just beneath this beautiful facade. But I wasn't the same Maria who had been pushed down those stairs 2 days ago. That woman had been trusting, naive, willing to make excuses for her daughter's behavior. The woman who stood in that kitchen now had eyes that saw clearly. I went directly to Elena's office, the same room where I had overheard her planning to put me in assisted living. If there were secrets to be found, they would be there. What I discovered in her desk drawers changed everything I thought I knew about my daughter's betrayal. The first document I found was a death certificate. My death certificate, dated 3 months in the future. Cause of death listed as natural causes, heart failure. At the bottom, a forged signature that was supposed to be from Dr. Mendoza, Elena's family physician. My hands were shaking as I read it. My own daughter had not only planned to kill me, she had already legally declared me dead. But that was just the beginning. In a folder labeled Estate Planning, I found documents showing that Elena had already transferred the money from my house sale into accounts under her name. There were also papers for a life insurance policy she had taken out on me, 500,000 pesos, with herself as the sole beneficiary. She had been planning this for months, maybe even years. There were printouts of assisted living facilities, but not the nice one she had mentioned to her friend on the phone. These were state-run institutions, places where people go to be forgotten, where families dump relatives they consider burdens. In one folder, I found a contract with a cremation service, prepaid, for me. But the document that broke my heart completely was a letter she had written to her brothers, Carlos and Miguel, explaining my sudden death from a heart attack. In it, she portrayed herself as the devoted daughter who had sacrificed so much to care for me in my final months. Mama passed peacefully in her sleep, the letter said. She often spoke of how grateful she was that we could give her such a comfortable home in her final days. I know this is difficult for both of you, but please know that she felt very loved. She had written her own version of my death, a version where she was the hero, and I was the grateful old woman who died conveniently out of the way. As I sat in her leather chair, surrounded by the evidence of her carefully planned matricide, I understood that the daughter I had loved and sacrificed for had died long ago. What remained was a stranger wearing Elena's face, someone capable of coldly calculating her own mother's murder. But then I found something else, something that changed my understanding of the situation completely. Hidden behind the other documents was a recording device, one of those small digital recorders. Curious, I pressed play. Elena's voice filled the room. "She's becoming a real problem, Ricardo. She's too nosy, asking too many questions about the money. No, we can't just put her in the facility yet. She might talk to Carlos or Miguel. I have a better idea. What if she just disappeared for a while, had an accident? Old people fall downstairs all the time." Ricardo's voice responded. "Elena, that's murder. I knew you were cold, but I never thought, are we really talking about killing your mother?" "She's not really living anyway," Elena said, her voice casual, as if discussing what to have for dinner. "She's old, she's in the way, and she has nothing left to contribute. It would almost be a mercy." I sat there listening to my daughter discuss my murder like it was a business transaction, and something inside me crystallized into pure steel. This wasn't about money, or even about convenience. This was about Elena's complete inability to see me as a human being deserving of respect and love. In her mind, I had become nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated exactly who she was dealing with. The Maria she thought she could dispose of was gone. The woman sitting in that chair, holding the evidence of her daughter's planned murder, was someone entirely different. Someone who understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to be a victim. Elena was about to learn that her mother wasn't dead yet, and that the lesson she was about to receive would haunt her for the rest of her life. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I knew this wasn't about revenge. This was about divine justice. After copying all of Elena's documents and recording that conversation on my phone, I left her house as quietly as I had escaped. But I didn't go far. I went to the one place I knew I would find sanctuary and support, my son Carlos's home, just 20 minutes away, in the same neighborhood where I used to sell empanadas all those years ago. When Carlos opened his door and saw me, disheveled, weak, with dirt under my fingernails and tears in my clothes, he didn't ask questions first. He simply pulled me into his arms and held me while I sobbed. "Mama, Dios mío, what happened to you? Elena said you went to visit Tia Rosa in Michoacán." "Mijo," I whispered, "your sister tried to kill me." Carlos is a good man, a mechanic who inherited his father's gentle heart, but also his protective instincts. When I showed him the documents, when I played him that recording, I watched his face transform from disbelief to horror to righteous anger. "We're calling the police right now," he said, reaching for his phone. "No, mijo, not yet." "Mama, she tried to murder you. She locked you in a basement for 2 days. She forged your death certificate." "I know, Carlos. But if we call the police now, what happens? She gets arrested, maybe goes to prison, and then what? She never learns why what she did was wrong. She never understands the value of what she destroyed." Carlos stared at me as if I had lost my mind. Maybe I had. But it was the kind of divine madness that comes when God shows you a path that seems impossible but feels absolutely right. I want to teach her a lesson she will never forget, mijo. Not to destroy her, but to save whatever is left of her soul. That evening, I called Miguel in Chicago. My eldest son had built a successful construction business there, and like Carlos, he had inherited the best parts of his father's character. When I told him what Elena had done, he was ready to fly down immediately with lawyers and police. Mama, you can't be thinking of protecting her after this. I'm not protecting her, Miguel. I'm protecting myself. If I let hatred consume me, if I seek only punishment, then Elena wins. She turns me into someone as heartless as she has become. Then what do you want to do? I had been praying about this all afternoon, asking God to show me the way forward. The answer came during evening mass at Carlos's neighborhood church, the same church where I had prayed so many times as a young widow, asking for strength to raise my children. Elena is having a dinner party this Saturday, I told my sons. One of those elegant affairs she loves so much, with Ricardo's business associates and their wives, people whose opinion matters to her more than anything in the world. And I'm going to attend. Carlos looked confused, but Miguel understood immediately. Mama, that's brilliant. She wants to pretend I'm dead? She wants to erase me from her life as if I never existed. Then let her explain to all her fancy friends why her supposedly dead mother is standing in her living room with evidence of attempted murder. But this wasn't just about public humiliation. That night I spent hours on my knees in Carlos's living room, praying for Elena's soul, because despite everything she had done, despite the coldness in her heart, she was still my daughter. The child I had carried, nursed, loved with every fiber of my being. Señor, I prayed, don't let me do this from hatred. Help me do this from love, the kind of tough love that refuses to enable evil, even when that evil comes wrapped in a familiar face. I thought about the parable of the prodigal son, but in reverse. Elena hadn't left home and wasted her inheritance. She had stayed home and tried to waste mine. But like the father in that story, I still hoped for her return to goodness. The next few days were spent in careful preparation. I had Carlos take me shopping for a new dress. Nothing fancy, but dignified. Black, like the dress I wore to Jose's funeral. But this time, it would represent not death, but rebirth. Miguel flew down Friday night, bringing copies of all the legal documents Elena had forged, authenticated by attorneys in Chicago. He also brought something else, a small recording device, much better than my phone. If you're going to do this, Mama, we need everything documented. She's still your sister, I reminded him. She stopped being my sister when she locked you in that basement, he replied, his voice hard. But she's still your daughter, and I respect your decision to try to save her instead of just destroying her. Saturday afternoon, I sat in Carlos's living room, holding my rosary and preparing mentally for what was to come. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge would have been letting her rot in prison without a second thought. This was about accountability, about consequences, about giving Elena one final chance to remember who she used to be before wealth and status corrupted her heart completely. Are you ready, Mama? Carlos asked. I looked at my reflection in his mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the broken, desperate creature who had been pushed into that basement. This was a woman who had walked through fire and emerged refined, stronger, clear about her worth and her purpose. I'm ready, I said. It's time Elena learned that her mother isn't as easy to dispose of as she thought. As we drove toward Elena's house that evening, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in months. Not because I was seeking revenge, but because I was finally going to speak truth to someone who desperately needed to hear it, even if that someone was my own daughter. When I appeared at that elegant dinner party, with my documents in hand and the truth on my lips, the silence was deafening. Carlos parked across the street at exactly 8:30 p.m., when Elena's dinner parties were always in full swing. Through the large windows of her dining room, I could see her guests, men in expensive suits, women dripping with jewelry, everyone laughing and enjoying themselves in that world Elena had worked so hard to enter. Miguel squeezed my hand. Mama, are you sure you want to do this? Once we walk through that door, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment she locked me in that basement, mijo. Tonight is just about facing the truth. I straightened my black dress, checked that my small purse contained all the documents and the recording device, and walked up to Elena's front door like I owned the place. Because in a way, I did. My life savings had helped pay for it. I didn't knock. I used the key Elena had given me when I first moved in. The key she probably thought was buried with me in that basement. The sound of my footsteps on the marble floor made Elena look up from her position at the head of the dining table. The wine glass in her hand fell to the floor and shattered. The color drained from her face so completely I thought she might faint. Mama, she whispered as if she were seeing a ghost. Hello, Elena, I said calmly, walking into the dining room where 12 of Guadalajara's most prominent citizens sat frozen in their chairs. I hope you don't mind that I'm a little late for dinner. I was detained. Ricardo stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. Maria, we thought you were visiting family in Michoacan. Did you? I smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. How interesting. Because I've been right here in Guadalajara the whole time. In fact, I've been right here in this house. Would you like to know where? Elena found her voice, though it was shaking. Mama, you're obviously confused. You've been sick, remember? Maybe you should lie down. Confused? I pulled out the recording device and placed it on the dining table. Let me play something that might clear up the confusion. I pressed play, and Elena's voice filled the elegant dining room. She's becoming a real problem, Ricardo. What if she just disappeared for a while, had an accident? Old people fall downstairs all the time. The reaction was immediate. Several guests gasped audibly. Senora Martinez, the wife of Ricardo's business partner, put her hand over her mouth in horror. Don Alberto, who served on the city council with Ricardo, stared at Elena as if seeing her for the first time. This recording was made 4 days ago, I continued, my voice steady and clear. The same day my loving daughter locked me in the basement of this house and told all of you that I had gone to visit relatives. Elena was shaking now, her perfect makeup starting to run as tears filled her eyes. Mama, please. You don't understand the context. Don't I? I pulled out the forged death certificate and held it up for everyone to see. Then help me understand this, Elena. Help me understand why you forged my death certificate 3 months before you planned to kill me. The silence in that room was absolute. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, marking each second as Elena's carefully constructed world crumbled around her. And this, I continued, pulling out the insurance policy. Help me understand why you took out a life insurance policy on your mother worth 500,000 pesos, with yourself as the sole beneficiary. Don Alberto stood up, his face pale with shock. Ricardo, Elena, what is the meaning of this? Are we witnessing a confession to attempted murder? Ricardo was backing away from the table, his hands raised as if to distance himself from the whole situation. I had nothing to do with this. Elena, tell them you were just talking, that you never meant. But she did mean it, I said, producing the contract with the cremation service. She even prepaid to have my body burned, so there would be no evidence left behind. Elena collapsed into her chair, sobbing hysterically. I wasn't going to go through with it. It was just an idea. Mama, you have to believe me. Like I should have believed you when you said the basement was just to teach me gratitude, I asked. Like I should have believed you when you said you wanted me to live here because you loved me. Senora Martinez stood up, her voice shaking with disgust. Elena, how could you? She's your mother, the woman who gave you life, who sacrificed everything for you. You don't understand, Elena screamed, her composure completely gone. She was ruining everything. She was embarrassing. She didn't fit in. She was always there reminding everyone where I came from. And there it was, the truth, finally spoken aloud. Elena wasn't just trying to kill me for money. She was trying to kill me because I represented a past she was ashamed of, a reminder of the humble woman who had raised her. So you decided I should die, I said quietly. because I embarrassed you." The guests were standing now, gathering their purses and coats, looking at Elena and Ricardo with the kind of horror reserved for the truly monstrous. These were people who valued reputation above all else, and they had just witnessed the complete destruction of Elena's. "Where are you going?" Elena cried, reaching out desperately to her departing guests. "Please, you don't understand. She's exaggerating. She's old. She's confused." But it was too late. The damage was done, and everyone in that room knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about in Guadalajara's social circles for years to come. Don Alberto paused at the door and looked back at Elena with disgust. "Señora, what you have done is not just criminal. It is an abomination. To harm one's own mother. There is no forgiveness for such sin." When the last guest had left, it was just Elena, Ricardo, my sons, and me in that suddenly quiet dining room. Elena was sobbing uncontrollably, mascara running down her cheeks, her perfect world shattered beyond repair. "Mama," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." I looked at my daughter, this broken, desperate woman who had tried to murder me, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel: pity. "Elena," I said gently, "I do forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences, and it doesn't mean I will ever trust you again." That night marked the end of one Elena and the beginning of another. The question was, which Elena would choose to be reborn from the ashes of her shame? After that night, Elena lost everything: her friends, her reputation, her marriage, and she came to beg for my forgiveness on her knees. It took 3 weeks for the full consequences of that dinner party to unfold. Word spreads quickly in social circles, especially when it involves something as shocking as attempted matricide. By the end of the first week, Elena had been quietly dropped from every charity board, every social club, every circle she had worked so hard to enter. Ricardo filed for divorce within 10 days, not because he was horrified by what Elena had done. I suspect he had known more than he admitted, but because he couldn't afford to be associated with the scandal. His business partnerships were already suffering, and his family's reputation, built over generations, was being tainted by connection to Elena. I was living peacefully in a small apartment Carlos had helped me find, furnished with some pieces from my old house that Elena had stored in her garage. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and after everything I had been through, the value of independence cannot be measured in pesos. That's where Elena found me on a rainy Thursday morning, 3 weeks after her world collapsed. I heard the knock on my door and looked through the peephole to see my daughter standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain, her hair disheveled, wearing clothes I had never seen before. Simple, inexpensive clothes that looked like they came from a second-hand store. When I opened the door, she fell to her knees right there in the doorway. "Mama, please," she sobbed, her voice broken and raw. "Please forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I'm begging you. I've lost everything. I have nothing left except the hope that somehow you might find it in your heart to forgive me." I looked down at this woman who had tried to murder me, who had locked me in a basement like an animal, who had been willing to burn my body to hide her crime. And you know what I felt in that moment? Not satisfaction, not vindication. I felt the same heartbreak I had felt when she was 5 years old and came to me crying because she had broken her favorite doll. "Get up, Elena," I said quietly. "Come inside." She looked up at me with surprise, as if she hadn't expected me to even open the door, much less invite her in. "Mama?" I said, "Get up." I made her coffee. Real coffee. The kind I used to make when she was little and would sit at the kitchen table doing her homework while I prepared dinner. We sat across from each other at my small table, and for the first time in years, I really looked at my daughter. The Elena sitting before me was not the polished, arrogant woman who had pushed me down those basement stairs. This was someone broken, humbled, stripped of all the artificial layers she had built up over the years. In her face, I could almost see traces of the little girl who used to help me make empanadas, who used to braid my hair and tell me about her dreams. "Tell me," I said, When did you stop seeing me as your mother and start seeing me as an obstacle? Elena started crying again. But these were different tears. Not the desperate tears of someone trying to manipulate, but the deep, painful tears of someone finally facing the truth about themselves. I don't know, Mama. I think it happened so gradually I didn't even notice. When I started working at that company, when I met Ricardo's friends, I began to feel ashamed of where I came from. Not of you specifically, but of poverty, of struggle, of everything that reminded me of being vulnerable. So you decided I had to disappear. I convinced myself that you would be happier in a facility, with people your own age. I told myself I was doing it for your own good. But that wasn't true, was it? I was doing it because I couldn't stand having anyone in my perfect new world remember that I used to be María del Carmen Vásquez's daughter, who sold empanadas to pay for school. And when I refused to cooperate with your plans, Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. I convinced myself that you were being selfish, that you were trying to ruin my life out of jealousy. I told myself that you had lived your life, and now it was time for you to step aside so I could live mine. And the murder plot? She flinched as if I had slapped her. I told myself it would be quick, painless, that you were already old and sick, that I was just accelerating the inevitable. I convinced myself that everyone would be better off, including you. I sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of her self-deception. Elena hadn't just been planning to kill me. She had constructed an entire justification system to make herself feel righteous about it. Elena, I said finally, do you understand what you're really asking me to forgive? I'm asking you to forgive attempted murder. I'm asking you to forgive the betrayal of everything you taught me about love and family and honor. I'm asking you to forgive the fact that I tried to erase you from existence because you inconvenienced my social climbing. And do you think you deserve that forgiveness? No, she said immediately. I don't deserve anything from you. I don't deserve your forgiveness, your love, or even your acknowledgement. But I'm asking anyway, because without it, I don't think I can live with what I've become. That's when I understood something profound about forgiveness. It's not something you give because someone deserves it. It's something you give because holding on to hatred destroys the forgiver more than the forgiven. Elena, I said, reaching across the table to take her hands, I forgive you. She looked up at me with shock, as if she couldn't believe what she had heard. But, I continued, forgiveness doesn't mean I'm going to pretend this never happened. It doesn't mean I trust you. And it doesn't mean there are no consequences for your actions. What do you mean? I mean that forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. I can forgive you and still protect myself from you. I can love you and still recognize that you are dangerous. I can pray for your soul and still refuse to put myself in a position where you can harm me again. Elena nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. If you want to rebuild any kind of relationship with me, I continued, it will be on my terms, with my boundaries, and only if you prove through your actions, not your words, that you have truly changed. What would I have to do? First, you will get psychological help, real help from a professional who can help you understand how you became capable of trying to murder your own mother. Second, you will find honest work, not the social climbing career that corrupted your values, but real work that serves others. Third, you will make restitution not just to me, but to everyone your actions have harmed. And then maybe after years of proving that you've remembered how to be human, we can talk about what kind of relationship we might have. Elena cried harder then, but I could see in her tears a mixture of grief and relief. Grief for everything she had lost, but relief that there was finally a path forward, even if it was a difficult one. Mama, she whispered, I love you. I know I have a terrible way of showing it, but I do love you. I know you do, Mija, I said. That's what makes this whole thing so tragic. You love me, but you lost the ability to value me, and that's something only you can fix. When Elena left that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope that everything would magically return to the way it was, but hope that my daughter might still find her way back to being someone worthy of the love I had always given her. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about the past. It's about the future. And the future was still unwritten. Today, at 72 years old, I can say that those 2 days in the basement didn't destroy me. They transformed me. It's been 8 months since that terrible night when Elena's world collapsed in front of her dinner guests. 8 months since I learned that forgiveness is not weakness, but the greatest strength a human being can possess. 8 months since I discovered that sometimes God allows the storm to teach us we're stronger than we ever believed. I'm sitting in my small apartment now, the same one Carlos helped me find after I escaped from Elena's house. It's not much. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a living room barely big enough for my old sofa, and the rocking chair Jose made for me when Elena was born. But it's mine, and after everything I've been through, ownership means something different now. This morning, like every morning, I woke up grateful. Grateful for my independence, grateful for my strength, grateful for the lesson God taught me about my own worth. Elena has kept her word about getting help. She's been seeing a psychologist twice a week, and she found work at a community center in one of Guadalajara's poorest neighborhoods, teaching basic literacy to adults who never had the chance to learn to read. It's honest work, humble work, the kind of work that serves others instead of serving her own ego. She comes to visit me once a month, always on Sunday afternoons, always bringing fresh flowers for the small altar I keep in memory of Jose and my grandmother. We don't talk about the past much anymore. What's done is done, and no amount of regret can change it. Instead, we talk about her work at the community center, about the students she's helping, about the small ways she's learning to find meaning in service rather than status. Is she the same Elena who pushed me down those basement stairs? No, but she's not yet the Elena I hope she can become either. That's a journey only she can take, one day at a time, one choice at a time. Carlos and Miguel visit me regularly now, bringing their children, filling my small apartment with the laughter and chaos I missed for so many years. My grandchildren call me Abuela Fuerte, strong grandmother, because Carlos told them the story of how I escaped from the basement and confronted Elena. They think I'm some kind of superhero, and you know what? Maybe I am. But my greatest joy comes from the work I found at our parish church, Santa Maria de Guadalupe. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I meet with a group of women my age, widows mostly, some who have been abandoned by their children, others who feel invisible in a world that worships youth and beauty. We call ourselves Las Guerreras de la Dignidad, the warriors of dignity. We meet in the church basement, ironic, isn't it? And we share our stories, support each other, and most importantly, we remind each other that our value doesn't diminish with age. Last week, Doña Carmen told us about her son, who wants to put her in a nursing home so he can sell her house. The week before, Señora Lopez shared how her daughter-in-law treats her like an unpaid maid in her own son's home. These women come to our group feeling worthless, invisible, like burdens to be managed rather than treasures to be honored. I tell them my story, not to shock them, but to show them that even in our darkest moments, we have more power than we realize. I tell them about those 2 days in the basement when I thought I was going to die forgotten and alone, and how that experience taught me that my worth doesn't depend on how others treat me. Listen to me, I tell them. We are not disposable. We are not burdens. We have survived wars, raised families, built communities, weathered storms that would break younger people. We are libraries of wisdom, repositories of love, and witnesses to decades of history. We are valuable not because of what we can still do, but because of who we are. Some of these women have found the courage to set boundaries with their children, to demand respect, to refuse to be mistreated. Others have discovered talents they never knew they had, starting small businesses or volunteer work that gives them purpose and dignity. My own relationship with dignity has been completely transformed. I used to think that being a good mother meant accepting whatever treatment my children gave me, making excuses for their behavior, sacrificing my own needs for their comfort. I thought love meant never saying no, never demanding respect, never putting my own well-being first. Now I understand that real love the kind that actually helps people grow and become better, sometimes requires us to set limits, to allow consequences, to refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when it comes from someone we love more than life itself. I learned that there's a difference between being humble and being humiliated, between being selfless and being self-destructive, between being forgiving and being foolish. Every morning when I look in the mirror, I see someone I'm proud of. I see a woman who survived attempted murder and chose forgiveness over hatred. I see someone who lost everything material but gained something infinitely more valuable: self-respect. The other day, Elena asked me if I'm happy. Mija, I told her, I'm something better than happy. I'm free. Free from the need to make excuses for other people's cruelty. Free from the belief that my value depends on being needed. Free from the fear that if I demand respect, I'll lose love. I want to speak directly to you, the person listening to this story. If you're a mother who has given everything and received nothing but ingratitude in return, if you're a father whose children treat you like a burden, if you're an older person who feels invisible and disposable, listen to me carefully. You are not too old to reclaim your dignity. You are not too weak to demand respect. You are not too late to start living for yourself instead of just for others. The love you gave was not wasted, even if it seems unappreciated. The sacrifices you made were meaningful, even if they seem forgotten. The strength you showed in raising your family is still there inside you, waiting to be used for your own liberation. God didn't give you life just so you could spend it being mistreated by the people you love most. He gave you life so you could live it with dignity, purpose, and joy, at every age, in every circumstance. Those 2 days in Elena's basement were the worst of my life, but they were also the beginning of the best of my life, because they taught me who I really am when everything else is stripped away. I am María del Carmen Vásquez. I am 72 years old. I am a survivor, a warrior, a woman of faith and strength, and I am just getting started.